back over to Gerald, I wanted to show you a couple of models that are being worked on right now. And this is the one done by Michelle Reed, who's hails from Bella Bella. And she uses the analogy of basket weaving. And we're going to see a little bit of it today. And while Nora's doing some basket weaving, Gerald will be doing some teaching scenario. But this is one model that's been looked at, and each strand is a piece of knowledge. And each strand could also represent a different community or a different story. And as researchers, we need to be able to find ways to weave them together so that we have a beautiful gift. And when we make that beautiful gift, how do we share it? How do we share knowledge? And that's what research is about. How do we gather it? What are the protocols when you approach someone to interview them? And then what do you do with it? Do we share it, or do we just keep it? And this next one is done by Rabina Thomas, who's Coast Salish and she's working at UVic. And she used this to be a part of her thesis, and this represents a longhouse teaching. So each post represents values in your approach to doing research. And she's actually got a lot of writing on it now. If you wanted to Google her or find, one of her stories is in your toolkit as well. So for her, she goes back to the longhouse teachings, and I don't really know how to say it, but to be of a good heart and a good mind when you're thinking about it, when you're approaching it, when you're actually doing your writing around it, and about everything is one. So in this 4 posts, she has the self, culture, place, and power. And as researchers, we need to recognize that we do come into this with power. Even though we're coming into it with the best intentions and it's going to benefit our people as researchers, there is a lot of power there because you have control of what's going to happen to the research. So those are 2 little examples I wanted to share that have been written about and are published. So this work that we're doing is getting out of the land. We don't ever talk about it in practice or policy or research, but land is so important to what we do and everything we do. Because without it, we don't have, we don't have the trees, and we can't build dip nets, and we can't teach our families. So the preparation involves knowledge of the land, knowledge of where to get it, and respecting the land for taking the pole. Similar to research is that when we're researching, that we need to know the community before even coming in and doing research, or we need to know the people that we're doing research with. We need to understand those ceremonies.
Well, when you're applying for research, you're trying to figure out, okay, I have to do this, I have to go in, I have to build that relationship with those communities before I do any research, because that relationship is really important, or they're not going to let you in. But the guidelines when you're doing a contract or when you're applying for a research grant are really tight. So sometimes it really scares me when I go into a master's program and it's all researchers and they're like, well, does that mean I have to talk to them? I'm like, oh my God. But I have to keep a straight face, right? This is really hard for me. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that would be a really good idea. And they're like, but what happens if they're not home? I go, well, you call them again. But that's what's scary for me, because I go to these classes and I talk to them about the community base, getting that buy-in from the beginning, working them with them from start to finish. I think that OCAP, we believe it produces more relevant and useful results, and it leads to higher levels of community participation, and it provides meaningful capacity development. So RHS was subject to an independent review by the Harvard University, who said that compared to other national surveys of Indigenous people from around the world, the 2002-2003 RHS was unique in First Nations ownership of the research process, its explicit incorporation of First Nations values into the research design, and in the intensive collaboration engagement of First Nations people and the representatives at each stage of the research process. It provides First Nations with key information for community, regional, and national planning, policy, and advocacy. It enhances their capacity and control over research and data. It offers scientific information validated by First Nations, and it assists First Nations in assessing their community's progress and health. Go ahead. It's groundbreaking that it's changed how First Nations research is done in Canada, and it's directed and implemented by First Nations in keeping with the principles of ownership, control, access, and possession.
Really excited because Indigenous people from around the world are going back to their stories, going back to their ceremonies, and talking about how that knowledge is important.
You can give your neighbor or a friend a fish to eat when you catch it, but it's only good for one meal. You teach your friend how to make a dip net, and you fed him for life. When you go and cut this tree, he said you pick it out, you look at it. The first day you find it, you look at it, you put your tobacco down at that tree, and you ask that tree permission to take it with the Creator. He said you visit it for 4 days. And each day you visit, you ask different things about it, how you're going to use it and what you're going to do. So this tree gets to know him. On the 4th day, he can chop this tree and train it. Tie a string on it. It was way longer, right? It came right out. Where about here on ends? And then this was longer. So he trained it and he let it hang like that. Both of them. And then he trimmed it off and then he put the rest in the fire. But this one, that guy, his teacher had told him, never throw it away because you've already prayed over it. So if he threw it away, then he wasn't satisfied by what was given to him. There is a teaching in this. The time that it took him to leave from where he was sleeping, where he was at, to go and visit this tree. And the teachings behind it. Sometimes we say there's no teachings in these. But if you think back, and I told him, that guy told him, and I told him, I said, think back what you thought, what you were thinking about when you were going up to visit this tree. And he thought back. And he realized what he learned, the things he told us, what he was thinking. And he said, most of the time I was thinking how, I was trying to visualize how it would come out, how the bow would come out and how I could handle it, how I could build it in order for it to correspond with me when I fish. So this tree knows him good, and that one there knows him good. So when he uses it, it'll be a part of him. It's just an extension of his arm. And how many times have we heard that? How many times have we sat down to tell our children that? We tell, oh, I'm your parent. We don't tell them that they're an extension of our life.
Hey,